Hello, everyone. It's Casey Millen. Today, I'd like to talk about Bible translations and common questions uh, or concerns about different translations, and I'll try to answer some of those. Um, I can speak on this subject because it's a passion of mine. I'm a Bible collector. At one point in time, I had 300 English translations. I was familiar with most of them. They just didn't sit on my shelf. Um, Unfortunately, I don't have most of my collection anymore. But yeah, one time I had around 300 English translations. Um, I did a project a few years back where I read the book of Colossians in 100 different English translations. And if you're interested, I can link it down below in the comments, um, what those 100 were. But yeah, I'm familiar with most any English translation that you could possibly think of or know of. I've either read most of it or a large portion of it. One question I get asked a lot is, what's the most accurate translation? And that's a difficult question to answer because there's different translation philosophies, and depending on um, the purpose of that translation, it can do a good job at one thing, but a poor job at another thing. So I think it's best to have a number of different translations to compare and to peer behind the translation scene to the translation process and what the Hebrew and Greek actually reflect. Um, this video, I'm not going to be talking so much about the difference between Protestant Bibles and Catholic Bibles. I'm familiar with most of the Catholic versions. Douay, I've read. New American Bible is excellent as well. Jerusalem Bible, New Jerusalem Bible, Knox Bible. I'm familiar with all of those. Confraternity version. And they're great. And the thing about them too is, of course, they include the full canon of Scripture. But talking about the standard Protestant number of books, there's many excellent translations that aren't done by Catholics as well. Um, One question I'm asked a lot is, what's the most literal translation? And for me, that has to be the ISR The Scriptures 2009 edition. You can read it online for free, or you can download it in YouVersion. It is um, the most literal out there that's still considered a translation that's not interlinear, and it's translated by Messianic Jews. So it uses Hebrew terminology and words for God and so forth, but it follows the Greek almost exactly. It gives a definition of what those words actually mean. Um, so yeah, it's an excellent resource. It's very literal. Probably it's the most accurate translation as far as literalness goes. It's even more literal than Young's literal translation of the Bible, but Young's literal is easier to read because it's not translated by Messianic Jews. Um, some literal translations that I like are the analytical literal translation, um, the Revised Standard Version. Uh, the ESV comes from that, but I prefer the RSV over the ESV for a number of reasons. It's more ecumenical, for one. Um, I'm not a big fan of the NASB. If you know me at all, that's one thing. I think it's overrated. It makes a lot of translation choices that I think are don't live up to its literal name that it has, reputation that it has. So I think it's an overhyped version. But that's just my take on it. Um, some more thought for thought translations that I think are accurate. Not a big fan of the NIV, not a super big fan of the NLT. Holman Christian Standard Version is okay. Um, but I really like the Common English Bible, which a lot of people don't like, but I think it actually gets the meaning of the Hebrew and Greek very accurately. When I've checked the differences that it has with other versions, it usually brings out the Hebrew and Greek more accurately. Another thought for thought translation, again, from a Messianic Jewish perspective, but it gives you great insight into the Hebrew culture and how they would have understood it in the first century, is the Complete Jewish Bible by David Stern. Or if you just get the New Testament, it's the Jewish New Testament. It's very accurate. Um, except in a few places, but for the most part, he's pretty accurate. I've read facsimiles of most of the early English translations, up from Wycliffe and down to the King James into the Revised Version of 1881. And those were my bread and butter in my early days. I read them and studied them almost exclusively. And so I have large portions of the Geneva Bible and the King James and William Tyndale's New Testament memorized. And Matthew's Bible, 1537. I'm familiar with all of those. And again, I think the RSV carries the Tyndale tradition in its most accurate representation. That's just my opinion. Some other translations that I would recommend for different reasons is I like Lavender's New Testament. He claims it's literal, but he allows more thought for thought to get the distinctives of the Greek vocabulary and tenses. So he does a pretty good job. His footnotes are good on the atonement. Obviously, I'm biased in favor of it, but if you want to understand the New Testament from an infused righteousness perspective, it's very good, and it also gives notes on the Greek in that. One excellent resource that you should get is the Apostolic Bible Polyglot. It's an interlinear Greek interlinear, and it uses Septuagint for the Old Testament, and it has a Greek dictionary concordance in the back. So it's very good resource. I think you can download it for free. Another resource that I like is the color-coded interlinear Bible. You can search for it, and then you can find it online. You can download it for free or read it for free. And that compares the Greek, Hebrew translation, Paleo-Hebrew, and it compiles it into one English translation, and it color codes it. So each word that is blue in each language will be blue, and so you know what you can trace the word through the different languages. And it's again, it's translated. This one is translated also from a Messianic Jewish perspective. I'm not Messianic Jewish, but I think that translations from that perspective give great insight into the New Testament as it would have been understood as in the early church. So once again, I'm not supporting everything that movement believes. I don't agree with everything, most of it actually, but I think it does have valuable information. One resource that everyone absolutely should download or read online is called the Net Bible, New English Translation, at bible.org. And it has over 60,000 translator notes. Over 7/8 of the page is all about translation issues. And it really gets you to peer behind the text. It's very excellent. One of my favorite Bibles. If I was stuck on a desert island, I might pick this one. It would be a toss-up between a couple of different translations, but this one is absolutely fabulous. You can't go wrong with it. I agree with almost every translation choice it makes. It's more in the middle between literal and thought for thought, but the notes give both the literal and the thought for thought translation, or the ideas behind in the Hebrew and Greek. One thing I forgot to mention is one set or series of translations that I like a lot is the New English Bible and its revision, the Revised English Bible. I think they're excellent translations. They're more thought for thought, but they're also very good and accurate, I believe. I recommend those to people as well, but they're harder to come by. They're not as common in the States as English, British translation. So those are excellent as well. If you're a Protestant, a good translation to check out, it's relatively new. It's called the Evangelical Heritage Version. It's translated by conservative Lutherans, and it does a good job of presenting the New Testament from that viewpoint. A good resource for understanding the Bible from a Lutheran perspective is the Lutheran Study Bible and the ESV. Also, the Reformation Study Bible and the ESV for Reformed thought. Unfortunately, Catholics don't have a whole lot of good study Bibles. There's the NAVERRE Bible that has notes, but mostly there's not a whole lot of Catholic study Bibles. There's the Douay Bible, which is based off the Catholic Catechism, which is good. The original Douay has footnotes, but as far as from a Catholic perspective, it doesn't. There's not a whole lot of material out there, unfortunately. If you want a general study Bible that's from a conservative perspective that tends not to be too biased in its footnotes, the ESV Study Bible is excellent as well. And also the Holman Christian Standard Bible Study Bible is as well. The NIV Bible Study Bible, I think, is a little bit liberal, but it's up to you from your perspective. Yeah, so those are some of my thoughts on Bible translations. If you have any question about any version, like I said, I'm familiar with almost every English translation available. If you want my thoughts on any particular one or any questions about translations or versions or history of Bible translation or thoughts about the translation process, if I like dynamic versus literal, and so on. Feel free to comment below or send me a message on my email at kcmillan94@gmail.com, or I'm also on Facebook at kcmillan. My profile pic is the pic in a video. So God bless, and talk to you next time. Bye.